Well, we heard last week that Canada was going to reopen the border to American travelers next month, but now it may not happen because of a strike by border officers. To discuss this in more detail is political reporter and one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilley. Brian, could these border agents actually strike, and what would that mean for our border?
It would mean slowdown after slowdown after slowdown, and not just at land border crossings. Of course, Americans, well, people from all over the world have been able to fly into Canada. The idea that we shut down non-essential travel at our airports is ridiculous when you look at the numbers. Absolutely, travel decreased, but not to the level you might think. But the land border was definitely closed off for anyone that didn't have a valid reason for driving across. Well, now we're looking at the fact that 8,500 border guards who are members of a specific division of the Public Service Alliance of Canada have voted 90% in favor of striking. And their strike date, Hal? August 6th. That's just 3 days before the border is supposed to open up for fully vaccinated Americans to be able to come into Canada, and just a month before fully vaccinated international travelers from other countries should be able to come in. So this is going to be a problem because, again, it's not just the land border officers. We're all used to seeing them. That you drive up, you show them your passport, or back in the old days, your driver's license. They ask you if you have any fruit, and they wave you in. It will also be the border agents that check you out at customs when you come through on an international flight. So this could grind everything to a halt and really stop that potential for a return of international travel.
Now, while the plan is to open our border to our American neighbors, the U.S. is not quite as accommodating. They're not doing the same for us, as travel restrictions will continue to be in place, Brian. What does that mean for the average Canadian who wants to head south?
Well, for people like my parents who want to go to their place in Florida, check up on their property there, it means that they can't go. They were looking forward to heading down in early August. They're normally snowbirds. They spend 5 to 6 months a year there. Small, modest place, but it's what you need as a senior. And they were hoping that to go and see the place they haven't seen in a year and a half. They don't want to go without their car, so they could fly down, rent a car, go through a lot of expense and a lot of hassle, but they're not able to drive down right now because the Americans have said no. But the Americans this week also said no to a host of other countries throughout the European Union, Britain, China, Indonesia, all kinds of countries. They're saying, nope, our travel restrictions are staying in place. One of the reasons they're giving is the Delta variant. The Delta variant is a bigger problem in the United States than it is in some of these other countries. The United Kingdom has had an upswing in cases of the Delta variant. So the problem is within the U.S. borders, but they're using the idea of keeping travelers out as a way that makes sense. Once upon a time, maybe that would have made sense, but right now I think we need to be more concerned about Americans coming here with COVID than going the other way.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is asking more Canadians to get vaccinated. In fact, the Prime Minister says that less than 1% of those hospitalized for COVID-19 are now fully vaccinated people.
Yeah, and Hal, look, I think that that's probably accurate, but we need better information to know for sure. That's not a stat that I or most journalists are able to verify, but we do know that the vaccines that have been approved in Canada are working. They are stopping people from getting seriously ill. They are stopping deaths from going up. We've seen that since December. That's why the third wave that we experienced across the country was nowhere near as deadly as previous waves. So it is something that we need to consider, but we also have to start looking at how we report on COVID-19. And one of the things that we have to get away from is the case count, because when we get to September and October, case counts are going to go up again, and that will freak people out. A lot of people will get panicked and nervous and demand that we go back into lockdowns. But if we're just having case counts go up, Hal, but we're not having corresponding rise in hospitalizations or deaths, like what they've dealt with in Britain. They've had a dramatic increase in case counts, but not an increase in hospitalizations or deaths. If we follow their pattern, there's no need for us to go into further lockdowns. And yet we're getting into fights over that already. We're getting into fights over the idea that you need a vaccine passport to go to a restaurant or a grocery store or to get your hair cut.
Brian, we saw a spike of COVID positive flights from the hotspot that was Great Britain last December and then India back in April. Now, the number crunching shows that we're on pace to surpass the number of COVID positive international flights this month compared to India in the spring. Where's the hotspot now?
The hotspot now is directly south of us, Hal. It's in the United States. It's not to the level that India was back in April. Back then, about 50% of the positive cases that were showing up at our airports were coming from India alone. And that's why the government shut down flights from India. They haven't resumed. We're expecting that to happen sometime in the fall. But the United States is becoming an exporter of COVID. I believe the second highest is Amsterdam, followed by Mexico. So in terms of the number of flights coming in, but we are seeing more flights coming in with COVID positive people. This is something that we have to be concerned about. Even as we reopen our economy, we still have to be worried about people coming in, bringing in new variants. Are they quarantining properly? I have not advocated for shutting down airports or the borders, Hal, but I have been in favor of saying, look, you're coming from outside, we need to test you, and you may need to quarantine. These are long-standing practices that countries have used to keep disease outside, and they've been used for a long time because when done right, they work. We just haven't always done them right.
Brian, we had a new Governor General installed on Monday. Mary Simon is the first Inuk Canadian to hold the post. Now, you've been to some of these swearing-in ceremonies before, and this one was a little more subdued by comparison?
Oh, I think the total number of people was 44. So a much smaller, more intimate ceremony in keeping with the times, in keeping with the fact that so many people still nervous, so many people still in lockdown. It would seem wrong to actually do what we've done before. Hundreds of people packed onto the ramp up to Center Block on Parliament Hill. Of course, they're not using Center Block, but where you and I used to work. Yeah. Coming into that setting, having the House of Commons packed, not only with every member of Parliament, but every senator, every Supreme Court justice, invited guests. When I saw Michael Jean sworn in, when I saw David Johnson sworn in, these were lavish events. David Johnson arriving in an open horse and carriage to show up for the event. Michael Jean, they had a choir lining the hall from the Senate singing as she came out. So these are different times, and this was a much more subdued message. But Mary Simon, now the first Inuk woman or Inuk Canadian, period, to hold the position, and someone that has been relatively well received outside of those complaining that she does not speak French.
So, Brian, do you think that the Prime Minister will be visiting the new Governor General anytime soon to ask for an election? Will the writ be dropped?
I'm still thinking it will, but I also know from speaking with people that the Liberals in the PMO are getting nervous. They're getting nervous about the idea that they go right now. The talk had been somewhere between August, I was about to say April, August 7th and August 15th. The money is now switched over towards the middle of August because Nova Scotian has an election and Nova Scotians go to the polls on August 17th. So they don't want too much of an overlap there. But you add into that the fact that we're still dealing with the pandemic. People are still nervous, Hal. People are dealing with high inflation and a high unemployment rate. And we could find out shortly whether Justin Trudeau is going to face a fourth ethics investigation. So there is a back and forth within the government right now about whether they call an election in the middle of August with voting day in the middle to late of September.
Now, on one of Trudeau's campaign-style stops this week, he announced that his government is holding back health care funding from New Brunswick over abortion access. What is that all about?
The Prime Minister actually said it was millions of dollars that he was withholding from New Brunswick from the healthcare funding envelope due to their lack of providing funding for abortion in private clinics. It turns out it's, at this point, just $140,000, but it could go up. We'll see. New Brunswick provides abortion services in just 3 pre-approved hospitals. It does not provide abortion funding in private clinics. But the government has decided that this is something that must happen, the Trudeau government, that is. In New Brunswick, both Liberal and Conservative governments over the years have not been the cheerleaders of abortion that you find in Ottawa. And so this is in keeping with what the public wants. But Justin Trudeau, as Blaine Higgs, the progressive conservative premier of New Brunswick, said, every time there's an election, Justin Trudeau brings up the issue of abortion. And Higgs is right. This is, to me, another sign that we are headed towards the polls because he wants to use this as an issue to rally his base. We don't see the Prime Minister going around and saying, well, you're not doing knee operations in private hospitals, and hey, over there, why aren't you doing cataracts in this place or that place? No, they're always talking about protecting the public nature of healthcare and don't fund private clinics. But when it comes to abortion, as you remember, there used to be, and I believe there still is, an abortion clinic just steps from Parliament Hill, and it gets funding all the time. And MPs who denounce private or public dollars going to private clinics support that one. That's what's going on here. This is pure politics, plain and simple.
Now, another reason you pointed to a potential election is a one-time payment to seniors that will be sent out in August. And now we're learning that many of these payments could go to people who've actually died. Like, I know sometimes politicians are, trying to get votes, but these people have passed on, Brian.
Yeah, it's one of the strange things of government. We hear at every election, a voting card shows up for someone who long ago passed on. In this case, it could be checks. Look, the Trudeau Liberals have decided that the week of August 16th, they're going to start making payments of $500. It's a one-time windfall payment, Hal. It's not taxable. It won't affect anything else. You get an extra $500 and you get an extra $500, and they're a bit like Oprah for seniors. Everyone's getting $500, and it's happening just as we're expected to go to the polls. But a briefing note to the minister in charge, Deb Schutt, told her back in May, given the way this is going out, given that it's mostly to people over the age of 75, we could be looking at many people who have passed on getting extra payments, and it will be difficult to get them back. The government is just ignoring this, moving forward with it. They want the votes. They're not too concerned about where the money goes.
Brian, the Prime Minister, who's a big fan of the Montreal Canadiens, who went to the Stanley Cup Finals this year, was very critical of the team drafting an 18-year-old player. Why is that?
The player's name is Logan Mailloux. He's an 18-year-old. He was considered a top draft prospect. And then just before the draft, he said to all the teams in the NHL, don't draft me. I made a mistake. I am not worthy of being drafted right now. I need to make amends. And the reason is this young man who used to play for the London Knights had gone over to Europe when the Ontario Hockey League was shut down due to COVID. Now, while there, he became engaged in a relationship with a woman, consensual relationship, but he shared intimate images of her with his teammates, something that is both morally wrong but also illegal, I believe both here and there. So he told the teams, look, don't draft me. I need to make amends for this. The Canadians took him. The Prime Minister, who has his own issues with groping, with his treatment of women, with blackface and everything else, showed that he doesn't believe in second chances for others. Logan Mailloux definitely made a mistake. The woman on the other end of this relationship has said all she wanted was an apology, which I believe she's had. But Justin Trudeau is someone who has broken trust many times and gotten second, third, fourth, and fifth chances, but showed that in this case, he doesn't believe it because he said it was absolutely wrong. Are there problems with the Habs drafting him, given this situation? Sure. But for the Prime Minister, a person in his position to be making that statement, I think goes too far. That's between Mailloux, the woman in question, the team, and perhaps to a degree their fans, but not the Prime Minister of the country to denounce an 18-year-old man when he has made so many mistakes and had so many second, third, fourth, and fifth chances.
Toronto Sun columnist and one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Hal.